Hello, welcome again to Language Learning Live. Today I'm going to look at the question of why I say I'm still a beginner in Irish Gaelic. When I say I started studying the Irish language, or Gaelic, back in 2013, you might think either I'm very slow at learning, or it's a very difficult language, lots of people say that, or both. Slow to learn? Maybe. In fact, all languages though have their harder and easier sides. And doesn't it really depend on which language you're starting from? By which I mean what your native language is, or your first language, and how much overlap there is between that and what you're trying to learn. The first non-native language I learned was French, starting in secondary school. So I was 12 when I started. The second was German, beginning in my late teens at home with the Collins Cortina method, so from a book, but no recordings or no sound files back in those days. And that was given to me by a close family friend who'd made really good use of it while living in Germany for a couple of years. I later went on to study it by other means as well. At age 19, I did one semester of Bahasa Indonesia, or Indonesian language, which I greatly enjoyed, but I didn't continue studying, and so now, over 40 years later, I've forgotten almost everything, barring a few words or phrases that sometimes come back to me, and maybe some of the pronunciation rules. Certainly a lot of the anecdotes that the teacher told us, so I think maybe teacher personality plays a large role in your memory of things too. I certainly can't speak that language. Yet I know that if I resumed studying it, parts of it would come back. It's as if what you learn lies dormant, much as with playing a musical instrument but getting out of practice. But it can be reactivated, so to speak. At age 21, I did something a bit more unusual in my circumstances, which was a year of Koine Greek, not a spoken language. And again, while I loved it, it's barely there in my memory, other than maybe helping recognise the derivations of words in other languages, my own and others I've studied. At age 23, I did a year of Italian at university. A much larger wodge, and it is a fairly shapeless or irregular wodge of Italian, a chunk, has remained in my head, which I suspect is because of its resemblance to my first foreign language of French. So that kind of grid being in place means it's easier to remember. Is it a case that the earlier you start, the easier it's going to be? Oh, maybe, but I've found German grammatically to be every bit as difficult as Irish, and I started German much earlier. I was quite young when I started. I can only generalise from my own case, not speak for others. But the level I've been able to reach was always tied to how much effort I put in, what the time commitment and the regularity were, how seriously I took the project, in other words. So, language, it's not you, it's me. I let you down. Because I've started Irish Gaelic and then for various reasons let it lapse on more than one occasion, then restarted and relapsed, I seem to remain what I think of as a beginner. It's not because the language is too hard, it's because I have not remained consistent in my work on it, nor ever been in circumstances of immersion, for example, living among native speakers. My passive skills in it, then so I can read and listen to much more now than I could as a complete beginner. So even when I've stopped actually studying, I've kept listening, or rather watching actually. The understanding through listening has been hugely helped by a long-term, let's say, addiction to the soap opera Ros na Rún, on which I'll do a separate video, at least one. Especially during the early part of the pandemic, that little imaginary village felt like my own village. And although the show actually does have a mix of both native and non-native speakers of the Irish language, or Gaelic, it does provide a kind of passive immersion, the best I could get access to anyway, and it certainly made me feel weirdly connected to a kind of fictive community during a very isolated time. Part of why I'm making videos on this language learning experience for this channel is to make myself commit to doing it again, and hopefully some of the insights I can provide will be useful to people who may be watching as well. So it's not that I've taken 12 years and I'm still getting nowhere. It's that I go for a while and then I let it drift and have to start all over again, and this is part of that process, but trying to make it more definitive. Do I lack motivation then? Typically people will say, in fact, as an unintended discouragement, why are you learning a language you won't even be able to use, or a language that purportedly people don't speak, when of course people do, just not a vast number of people compared to some of the world's languages. Well, that's a whole separate question to refute and to take up and explore in a subsequent video. Bye for now.